Hello, I'm Xiao. I'm presenting on behalf of my team, Chunchen, Hazel, and Jeanne from Stanford University, and Daigo from Kogakuin University about our Kai-24 paper, How Culture Shapes What People Want from AI. And our work has been supported by Stanford Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute. I'll start with the very short video summary of the paper. So let's unpack the ideas. Why do we need to study culture and AI? These days, we see an almost gold rush of designing and applying AI to optimize every single urban function, from healthcare to school education to organizational operations. However, dominant visions about AI development in the US have mostly been based on cultural views common in European American contexts. And there are potentially other views about AI coming from cultural views from other cultural groups, yet they are not equally represented in AI developments. And therefore, it is likely to result in biased technological developments that falls short of fulfilling the unmet needs of a wider segment of the world population. So it is important to empirically examine culture and AI to enable AI stakeholders to increase representations of different cultural worldviews and values in design and use of AI, ultimately create a more equitable and safe AI. So to study this, we have adopted and extended the cultural psychology theory about cultural variations in our self-construals. For instance, in the interdependent model, people tend to share the idea that human and the environment are separated, and the environment is perceived as a relatively inner background for people to stand out and act upon. Bringing change to and exert control over the environment is the primary means for people to experience and build their own sense of self. By contrast, in the interdependent model, here at the bottom of the graph, people tend to see that human and the environment aren't so separated. The environment can be perceived to have a great deal of agency and also seen as active, powerful, and full of life. So we argue that theory can be used to study how cultural models of the self guide people's relationship with AI products and systems as well. For instance, people from contexts that promote an interdependent model of self see the environment as an active source of influence on themselves, which lead them to think, to see connection with AI and to prefer AI with greater capacities to influence. So we formulated our hypothesis to specifically study 3 cultural groups using survey studies. As you can see here on the right side, our first set of hypotheses is European Americans will seek control over AI more than Chinese, whereas Chinese will seek connection with AI more than European Americans. African Americans' desire to control and connect with AI will lie in between those of European Americans and Chinese, because African Americans' model of the self and environment reflect a combination of independence and interdependence. The second set of hypotheses is that European Americans will be less likely to want AI to have capacities to influence than Chinese, and that African Americans' desire to for AI to have capacities to influence will fall between those of European Americans and Chinese. So to study this, we first conducted a pilot study to confirm the cultural models of the self in the environment, and then we tested the hypothesis about the ideal AI and human AI interaction with a main survey study. For the pilot study, we had 131 European Americans, 121 African Americans, and 121 Chinese after attention checks. And the main measure is a pictorial 7-point scale question asking participants about their ideal level and direction of influence between the person and the environment. So a one-way ANOVA analysis revealed a significant effect of cultural group. And looking more closely, when compared with European Americans and African Americans, Chinese were more likely to ideally want the environment to influence the person. The difference between European Americans and African Americans was in the predicted direction, but was not significant. After confirming this theory, we conducted a main study with 127 European Americans, 105 African Americans, and 116 Chinese to test the two hypotheses about AI's capacities to influence and people's tendencies to control versus connect with AI. As an example of the survey questions, we used a stimulus sampling and presented participants to a random one of the 6 very different scenarios of AI applications and asked them to decide between the 2 options about AI applications in an ideal situation. So the left column here are the 9 items that depict AI as having low capacities to influence, whereas the right column here are ways how AI have high capacities to influence. So we also ask questions about people's preference for how important it is to control over versus connection with AI and other demographic questions. We find that indeed there are group differences in preferences for ideal AI's capacities to influence. Chinese's preference for ideal AI's capacities to influence is higher than European Americans, and our findings about African Americans fell between the 2 groups. In terms of control versus connection, Chinese regarded it as less important to control what AI does than both European Americans and African Americans. And Chinese also rated having a sense of personal connection with AI as more important than both European Americans and African Americans. And between African Americans and European Americans, African Americans rated it more important to connect with AI than European Americans, but there was no significant difference between African Americans and European Americans in the importance of having control over AI. And notably, while Chinese placed the lowest importance on having control over AI, their average score still reflect a desire of having control over AI. We also examine if the importance placed on control versus connection-mediated cultural differences in their preferences for AI's capacities to influence, as our theory suggests that people imagine ideal AI's capacities to influence in a manner that is consistent with their preferred models of human AI interactions. So indeed, the mediation analysis results provided some evidence for our theorization. Please also check our paper for our additional analysis controlling for demographic differences in the three cultural groups, as well as people's familiarity with AI. And also, you can find additional discussions about the study limitations and future directions. So overall, our findings urge AI designers, developers, and researchers to really rethink the often taken for granted control-based relationship in designing human AI interaction. And while some of the AI characteristics in our measures may be seen as very wild, we encourage more research and practices to open up alternative ways of imagining AI to see really from diverse perspectives and learn from other ways of how people may relate to their environments. So the current work also urges researchers to reflect and reevaluate how human-centeredness is currently conceived and implemented in their AI developments, and really ask the question, what conceptions of human do I have when I think of human-centeredness? So finally, our work advances the human-computer interaction field by developing rigorous and systematic empirical approaches to examine people's culturally shaped preferences regarding AI, illuminating the implicit and latent cultural assumptions about humans that are built into current models of human-computer interaction, and through this, also expanding current models of human-computer